Hey everybody, it's Don. I'm out here on this sunny February day, as rare as it might be, to visit the Three Sisters and some other highlights at Sugarcreek MetroPark, one of the jewels of the Five Rivers MetroPark system around Dayton, Ohio. So let's go. Sugarcreek MetroPark is a pretty heavily used metro park because of its situation relative to some of the larger suburbs in southeastern Dayton, the greater Dayton area. So it has pretty heavy use, and they paved some of the initial trails here, or graveled trails. The trails are really wide, so it's often used by runners and people pushing strollers, and you can bring pets here and all sorts of stuff. So now I'm here on a Monday morning. We happen to have some sun finally after it seems like a week. And so there aren't many people here right now. So it's a good time to visit. I always try to do that so I can walk pretty freely and talk pretty freely without seeming like a weirdo, more than I actually am. So what we're gonna do is, my main goal today, as I said, is to visit the famous Three Sisters of Sugarcreek MetroPark. And we'll take some measurements on those and talk about those trees. And then we'll hit a few other highlights along the way. All right, so let's go. Sugarcreek MetroPark is one of the parks in the Five Rivers MetroPark system of Dayton. And it is, you know, the MetroPark strives to really preserve and restore a mixture of habitats at any of their preserves. Many of their preserves are forested, either regenerating forest with some old growth sections, and parts of their preserves are devoted to prairie restorations or prairie preservation. And here at Sugarcreek is a quite large example of a prairie restoration. And it's one of the larger, probably single tracts of prairie in their system. There are some other large ones in places like Carriage Hill MetroPark, where I visited and watched a prairie burn last year. So let's just glance out here and take a look at the prairie restoration at Sugarcreek. All right, so I don't know what the acreage is on this exactly, but it's gotta be probably 30 acres, I would guess. And, you know, up close to us, we can see some of the grasses, your standard big blue stem and Indian grass, little blue stem. There's goldenrods out there. Of course, this is the winter interest part of a prairie. Okay, is still beautiful even in the winter with these golden amber colors. And of course there's seeds, there's animals, there's birds utilizing this prairie even this time of year. Rabbits, foxes, raptors, so forth. So that's the prairie restoration at Sugarcreek, and we'll continue down the trail, the orange trail, toward the Three Sisters. Here we are at a power line right away that crosses the trail, crosses the Metro Park. And just to make a point that power line right-of-ways are required to remain treeless underneath the high tension wires. And so these are ideal spots if you're able and interested to restore prairie, to put tall grass prairie or what have you, whatever makes sense for your area, because they have to remain treeless. So you can see here that the Metro Parks has indeed restored this power line right away as tall grass prairie that links to some of their own holdings, of course. And so basically doing that allows them to maintain this. I imagine they mow it. They probably burn here occasionally as well. And it prevents anybody needing to come in here and cut trees down and herbicide them and that kind of stuff. So power line right-of-ways, because they have to remain treeless, are a good spot to do restoration, because you also cannot build anything underneath these wires, right? So why not put in something that's low growing, native, and supports biodiversity? Okay, so we're going to continue in this direction to the Three Sisters and stop and spend some time there. We're on our approach to the Three Sisters. We've been passing through forest that's regenerating, probably mostly less than about 50 years 50 to 60 years post agricultural use. But for some reason, there were a few trees left behind throughout the entire history of exploitation of this area. And the three sisters are representatives of a few old growth trees that were preserved. For the most part, we'll describe one issue here, but these are the three sisters are white oaks, Quercus alba, and they are impressive, okay? Especially the first that we'll take a look at that should be coming into your view now, and that's the big sister. So let's take a view of her from up here first. Okay, we've been walking along this little trail, along a little ridge, and then it dips down to a tributary there. And the big sister is just off to your right in a little opening here. She has a very a growth form that illustrates that she was open grown for much of her life. You can see there are some lower branches there that have been removed, but that just illustrates that for much of her life she was open grown, very widely spreading branches. Again, as I've mentioned in other episodes, trees that have been growing in heavily forested conditions will be taller and with far fewer lower branches. And so this has the morphology of an open grown tree. There's periodic maintenance you can see that's been done on the big sister here, with some branches being removed. I see this large branch coming off to the right here is dead. So they're likely to remove that just for safety purposes, because this tree gets a lot of visitors. And she's impressive. All right, so what I'm gonna do before I show you the other trees is get a measurement on her on camera here and talk a little bit more about her age and so forth. So hang on. The big sister is on a slope, so it's hard to set up my camera properly and get a good measurement. So I think I have a spot here where I can hook my tape and get this all on camera to show you how big this thing is. Okay, I'm about 4.5 feet up from the ground, and I'm going to get a DBH. She has a flaring base here, so I have to go way out. And for fun, there's a multiflora rose right here, just to add insult to injury. All right, so what I have, and I'll bring the camera closer here in a moment, is a tree that is about 79 inches in DBH. That means she's about 6.5 feet in diameter. Now the big sister, people like to talk about how old she might be, or trees of this size might be. So let's talk about that a little bit. This tree is estimated to be around 600 years old. Here's the measurement. It's upside down, okay? But that's for any doubters out there. And how do we know this tree is about 600 years old? Well, I have talked to the former conservation director at the Five Rivers MetroParks about the history of trying to age this tree. And this tree, you know, is legendary in this area. And he told me that basically some of the first conservation directors in the Five Rivers MetroPark system did some coring in the 60s and maybe early 70s, where you basically drive a coring tool into the center of the tree, pull it out, and basically count the rings on the core that you pull out. It's not that complicated. Sometimes cores do not go to the center of a large tree like this. You have to do some estimating. But if you get an average number of rings per inch, for example, and you know the size of the tree, then you can get an estimate on its age. Now, people like to think that most trees in areas like this are 200 years old or less, you know, after major European colonization, but there were a handful of trees that were left alone. And obviously this is a tree that's been here a long time. It was just left alone. It would have been a huge tree 200 years ago. And so people probably honored and respected it even back then. And that's why it's still here. Okay, so that's the big sister, a grand white oak in Sugarcreek MetroPark. And so next we'll take a look at the other two sisters of the three sisters. Just downslope from the big sister is the smallest of the three sisters, the little sister, and one I like to call the twisted sister. You'll see why. Because she has a very twisted trunk. She's much smaller, much younger than the big sister, of course. I could get a measurement on that and tell you here shortly, but I won't do it on camera. But again, the notable feature of this tree is its twisted trunk. Now, how does that happen? Well, that's a growth pattern that is established very early in the life of the tree, at the growing point. It almost looks like the tree has spiraled out of the ground. And indeed, that's true. Now, you do have to remember that trees grow from the top up. The ends of every branch have terminal buds where all the growth and elongation occurs. They don't grow from the bottom up, okay? They grow from the top and continue. They build the material below them and keep going up. So this twisted pattern was established very early in the life of this tree, just based on how the cells that were being produced in the apical meristem of that terminal bud were being laid down in the tree as it grew. Okay, so they were laid down in this slightly off-kilter twisted pattern, and it continued that sort of growth form as the tree grew. So it's continuing to do that the whole way out. Its branches in the terminal bud up there. It's probably hard to see on camera, but as I look at the top younger parts of the tree, they're twisted too, right? Because that pattern is established in the apical meristem and it just continues. I see quite a bit of lower branch dieback on this tree. It's certainly alive and still looks okay, but it does show some dieback, I guess, of the branches. There's no obvious hollows down here. That doesn't mean there couldn't be something inside. But, okay, that's the youngest of the sisters, the twisted sister. As I mentioned, these are white oaks, Quercus alba. And here's a white oak leaf from these trees. And you can see how deeply lobed it is. And that's an indication of a tree that is growing in more open conditions. White oaks have very variable leaves. That degree of depth of those lobes, those sinuses, you would say, varies a lot with light conditions. So the shadier it is, the less deep they'll be, and there will be more leaf material per area, so to speak. And when there's a lot of light available, they don't need as much leaf area, and so those sinuses will be deeper, and those lobes will appear to be skinnier and longer. All right, so that's a leaf of one of the three sisters. All right, now, if the big sister's in front of me there, and the little sister's over there in the distance, the twisted sister, where's the second sister? Well, that's a different story. Here's the second sister. The second sister was a large tree. It was about intermediate in size, I'd say, between the big sister and the little sister. And as you can see here, now that it's fallen, it was quite hollow. All right, had a very obvious hollow when it was standing. But this tree is clearly on the ground. It's been on the ground now for about 16 years, I think, 16 or 17 years. And I learned about these trees before I visited them ever. And one of the ways I learned about this tree is there was a news article in about 2008 about it catching fire. And I think there was some debate about whether it got struck by lightning or that vandals caught it on fire. I think the latter was what happened. I don't believe they ever caught anybody or anything, but it's suspected that vandals lit a fire. You know, again, this tree was hollow, so I think they lit the fire inside the hollow of the tree and weakened it. It didn't kill it initially, but weakened it. Here's some remnant charcoal, actually. You can kind of see the charcoal. Oh yeah, you can see the charcoal here in this part of the tree. So that weakened it significantly. Again, it already had a huge hollow, and it eventually came down in a windstorm. Okay, so the second sister is one for the ages now, and she's starting to return all the nutrients stored in her trunk back to the earth, little by little. Again, that takes a long time. Again, this tree has been sitting here for, like I said, about 16 years or more, 16, 17 years. And these parts of the tree that have dried and are up off the ground are gonna be around for a long time. So you'll probably still be able to see this tree 20, 30 years from now, remnants of it. Because it just simply takes that long. You know, there's a lot of lignin, indigestible lignin in that wood, a lot of tannins that have to be broken down. And this is why we build things out of white oak, why it's such a prized wood for building fine furniture and flooring, things like that. Tough, resilient, resistant to microbial breakdown. Didn't think you'd hear that one today, right? So, all right, so that's my visit to this little clearing at Sugarcreek MetroPark, taking a look at the three sisters. And I think before I leave, there's another nice tree I'd like to show you if I can find it. So let's take a little more time here to see a big sycamore that I hope we can find. Rather than look for that sycamore, I think I'm going to do an episode completely on sycamores in Greene County, Ohio, because there's a number of tremendous specimens here in this county, in this area. What I thought I'd do instead is take a walk through the Osage Orange Tunnel, okay, which is also famous here at Sugarcreek MetroPark. So you can see that extending behind me. So let's take a walk through it and talk about this species. So these are Osage oranges. Here's a few right beside me. Okay, there's the bark. They are kind of, they almost have the appearance of a very large honeysuckle shrub is what they look like. Although they can grow into large trees with single trunks. But they often have this multi-trunked kind of appearance, and they are thorny. Their branches are thorny, and they're very tough and brittle and stout. And so first of all, Osage oranges are not native to this area. They're native to parts of Texas, but they were planted widely throughout the United States, North America, just as you see here, as a living fence row or hedge row. Now, they don't really serve as that when they're this large and there's lots of space between their trunks, but when they're younger, multi-stemmed with these tough thorny branches, they can serve as a natural fence for things like cattle and such. And so this is clearly a row of Osage oranges that was planted here. These trees are pretty large. There's some very large ones here. Could be 100 years old, maybe, back when this was farmed. And they've grown into the Osage Orange Tunnel that you can see as I'm walking. Of course, when this leafs out, this gets more dramatic as you go through the season, but it's pretty cool this time of year too, where you can see those arched branches. Now, Osage Orange is known for making these really large green brain-like fruits. And those fruits are filled with seeds, and things like squirrels will pick those things apart, and birds, and I think deer may nibble at them. But they make this type of fruit that was thought to be primarily dispersed by large ground-dwelling mammals that aren't around anymore. Now, they have no trouble surviving at present, but their major dispersers are probably not here anymore, the ones they evolved with. But anyhow, the other little tidbit about Osage Orange is that because they have this stout wood, their branches were used for arrow making and bow making. Okay, tough, stout, resilient wood that could flex quite a bit without breaking. And so that's the Osage Orange Tunnel at Sugarcreek MetroPark. All right. And so with that little visit, tour down memory lane, I'm going to conclude this episode. And this is the Naturalist signing off, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.